back with Deep Images, and tonight we're going to talk about something very special, werewolves. It's been kind of a running joke among the cast since Halloween. We won't get into why. It's our inside joke, but was finally we were just like, what the fuck? Let's do werewolves. So
It's all my fault.
well, I blame Tim Tolbert, who's not here, for perpetuating the
Okay,
in joke.
yes, Tim
You
did
know.
initiate the running gag, but I'm the one who made us finally do this because I basically said that as a shit post in the group chat. Like, well, okay, since I'm going to miss this session because originally we were going to do this session on a night that I couldn't make it. I was like,
That's
well,
right.
why don't you guys go ahead and do werewolves? Because I don't want to miss our next topic because I actually really want to do that one.
And by that
But
time,
here
you'd
we
already
are.
all started picking werewolves. So we're each gonna pick a werewolf character that we really like, and of course, talk about the movie that they appear in or TV show or whatever. Um, but yeah, I like it. I like the character thing. It's similar to when we did Women Warriors, which by the time you see this, Women Warriors has already been posted. I'm actually about to post part one probably tomorrow,
Woo.
and it is incredible. I'm saying that to you all and you all watching, everybody. It's really some of the best stuff we've ever done. So we've got a lot to live up to. So Justin Cotton can't make it tonight, and I always get him to read my material in this mellifluous Australian accent. So without that, I'm just going to read this off of a website. I didn't write it myself. It's called the WereWiki, which was a disappointingly scant on detail kind of website. For a guy like me, I was like, wow, I'll dig into this, and the WereWiki will, I'll learn something I didn't already know. And, it only took me 7 or 8 minutes to dig into the whole site and I didn't learn anything. So, but I do have this little fun introduction they wrote. So, WereWiki, thank you. But seriously, you got to beef up this website, man.
Step it up.
Werewolf mythology concerns the lycanthrope, an ancient legend common in European folklore. Werewolves have become widespread icons and famous topics of fiction and popular culture. In medieval times, many people were killed and executed under accusations of being a werewolf. During the witch trials, many were accused of monstrous attacks and black magic. Witches were hanged and wolves were killed. The curse of the werewolf is a supposed ability for a human to transform into a wolf or anthropomorphic wolf-like creature. So we've been talking about taxonomy and how we're picking these people characters. A lot of them are like going to be super obvious, but some of them there's going to be like, are they really a werewolf? What constitutes it? So we had a little bit of talk before we start shooting, and we'll bring you guys watching in on it when we get around to that. But first we're going to go with Richard, who actually is going to talk about two well-known, well, one at a time, but a well-known creature. Thanks, Richard.
Okay. Well, we're going to start out tonight with the single most iconic, and that's an overused word, most iconic werewolf character of all, who's Larry Talbot, played by the amazing Lon Chaney Jr. in 5 films for Universal. And he is the template, the character both in human form and in werewolf form. When you think of werewolves, you think of Larry Talbot. And there are some antecedents in film, but not a lot. If you think about it, this is what put werewolves on the map. The Wolfman in 1941 put werewolves on the map.
Yeah.
Universal had a go with it in 1935 with Werewolf of London, which was originally going to be a Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi team up, with Karloff playing the werewolf and Lugosi playing the scientist kind of side character. Karloff was doing Bride of Frankenstein, so he didn't have the time to do it. So they just completely recast it with Henry Hall and some other people. And Jack Pierce, who was the legendary Universal makeup artist, had this design he wanted to do for the werewolf. Henry Hall had a background in makeup, theater makeup, and he didn't like the concept because he said that he wanted the character to be more recognizable as the human who transforms into the werewolf. And so he nixed that makeup design. And briefly, the Werewolf of London is a little more science-based. There is some background of lycanthropy in it, but mostly it's kind of a science-based approach to it.
It has. I feel like it has a little alchemy with the moonflower and all that stuff.
Definitely, definitely.
Even his name is Williford Glendon, and Glendon's a reference to Zanoni, which many
Mhm.
people, the alchemical novel, which influenced Twin Peaks, among other things.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I did want you to mention that because that really was the first werewolf movie that I'm aware of.
There was apparently a silent German werewolf film, but I
Oh,
don't
okay.
think it still exists, and I've forgotten the name of it. I don't think anyone's ever seen it or hadn't seen it since it came out. So basically, The Werewolf of London was the first one, but the more important one was in 1941 they uh, made The Wolfman, and Lon Chaney Jr. was cast to be in the film. And briefly about Lon Chaney Jr., he was the son of Lon Chaney, who was the silent film superstar, horror superstar, and Lon Chaney Jr. His dad didn't want him to be an actor, so he basically sent him to plumbing school, and he became a plumber. And after his dad passed away, he got the acting bug and made it into films, and I guess was best known at the time for doing of Mice and Men, playing Lenny.
Mm.
Tell me about the rabbits, George. That they
Oh my gosh.
every Warner Brother cartoon references that. So he was becoming more well known, and he had a go at a horror film called Man-Made Monster, and the director George Wagner did that, who also did The Wolfman. And but they cast the film with Lon Chaney Jr. finally, and Chaney always referred to the Wolfman, Larry Talbot, as his baby. He was most well known for that, and it was his favorite role. But really, if the Wolfman was anybody's baby, it was Kurt Siodmak, who was the screenwriter, and everything about werewolf knowledge that is canon in films afterwards. Siodmak had a heavy hand in solidifying what that was. The silver bullet, the being killed by a silver bullet, the werewolf most wanting to destroy that which he loves, comes from Siodmak's approach to it. And uh, so the Wolfman, I'll give you a brief rundown of the plot. He plays Larry Talbot. Lon Chaney Jr. plays Larry Talbot, who is a returning heir to a title in Wales, and so he's been living in America. His brother became the heir, so he went off to America, and of course came back with an American accent. But his brother dies in a hunting accident, so Larry comes back to the family estate, and his father is played by Claude Rains. Really good, really great cast, by the way, in this film. He comes back and has some friction with his dad. But I have several films to cover, so I'll make this very brief. He goes to a carnival with Evelyn Ankers, who plays the leading lady in the film, and he goes to a gypsy played by Maria Ospinskaya, who was a very well-known Russian actress in theater that came to the United States after the communists took over, and he getting his fortune told, and the gypsy sees a pentagram in his palm, and now I may be getting something. I didn't actually have a chance to rewatch the film, but I've seen it so many times, I'll just sort of wing it. He's a pentagram in his palm, foretelling that he's going to become a werewolf. And it turns out her son, played by Bela Lugosi, and also named Bela in the film, is a werewolf. So Larry Talbot is bitten by the werewolf. He attacks a girl, the best friend of Evelyn Ankers, Larry Talbot, who's acquired a silver tipped cane with a wolf's head, beats the werewolf to death, and it turns out it's Bela Lugosi. He let me think real second. He kills the werewolf. People kind of don't buy that it was they think he made a mistake, and in the excitement a wolf came and he killed Bela by accident. And but
Whoops.
he's
Whoops.
Yeah,
what's that?
whoops. Whoops.
Big whoops there.
Sorry, Bella.
And so he becomes a pariah in the village. But it turns out, Bela was a werewolf. He bit him, so he becomes a werewolf. In the original film, it's not just on the full moon that he becomes a werewolf. There's a werewolf season apparently, and it's not just on the full moon. That came in the second film. But the film, it's really kind of a perfect storm, and one of the reasons is that George Wagner, the director, mostly known for making westerns and action films. He made a couple of other horror films, but he's not really as well known as someone like James Whale or someone for making horror films. So he, it's not really like an auteur approach. Really, it's Kurt Siodmak is the person that makes this what it is. Mm-hmm. But they continue with other films through the series. He appeared in 5 films. He was in Wolfman in 1941, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman in 1943, A House of Frankenstein in 1944, and House of Dracula in 1945. And finally, in a swan song, Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein in 1948. But talk about the character of Larry Talbot and what makes Chaney's performance pretty cool, and what makes everyone think of when they think of werewolves is a very tortured person. It really goes into the kind of there's all elements of mental illness, alcoholism, anything that makes a person not act like their normal self. They really dwell on that aspect of the duality of humans, and our ability that a person is otherwise a pretty nice person doing horrible things. And Chaney himself was an alcoholic, and many people make the connection of apparently he was a pretty nice guy and pretty well liked, unlike the person I'll talk about later, Oliver Reed. But he was well liked, but he struggled with alcoholism, and it was hard for him to keep jobs after a certain point in his career. And he became something of kind of a joke later in his career. He was beloved on one hand by horror fans, but he appeared in all kinds of just, stinkers for the last part of his career, including La Casa del Terror, which was a Mexican horror film with the Mexican comedian Tintan. And it was hacked into bits and released over here as Face of the Screaming Werewolf. They got another film, and American producer cut them all up and dubbed it. And apparently, it's pretty close to unwatchable. I haven't seen it, but I do love
that sounds awful.
The Face of the Screaming Werewolf.
And I love Mexican cinema, so
not this one.
I'm insulted.
It's been a few years since I've seen the Wolfman. Doesn't he die at the end of each of these movies, and then he comes back?
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
I'm trying to remember what's the hook as to why he's not dead. Is it because they didn't use silver on him, or?
Well, what happens in the Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman? He does come back. And what happens is I haven't had a chance to rewatch this, but if I remember it, he was buried and they put wolfbane on him. And somebody, I forget the context, they dig him up and they take the wolfbane off, and he comes back.
Right.
And the next one was it Frankenstein. After that, House of Frankenstein. At the end of the second one, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, they are washed into the basement and then frozen, and then the Boris Karloff character in House of Frankenstein finds him and thaws them out. And in House of Frankenstein, let's see, I'm trying to remember what happens in the end of House of Frankenstein, but he comes back in House of Dracula.
I think he's shot by the gypsy girl that he loves, and then House of Dracula. They cure him.
He has to be killed by somebody.
Yeah.
So, but then he's brought back, and I can't remember how. And then Abbott and Costello meet Frank. They don't even bother having a
reason.
They just bring him back, And
there's kind of no real continuity.
It's been so long since I've seen the Abbott and Costello one, but I remember liking it as a kid.
It's fun.
It's a lot of fun, but Kurt Siodmak, the screenwriter, wrote the first three, I believe, but didn't write the House of Dracula or Abbott and Costello. And as a franchise, the first film is, I think, it's as they say, iconic and it's still worthy of viewing. The other ones are diminishing as they go. As a kid, I loved House of Frankenstein. I've rewatched it a few times, and it's pretty choppy. It's like a bunch of 30-minute films kind of put together, because Dracula character dies like 20 minutes into the thing. And so it's kind of like a bunch of short horror films kind of put together.
Isn't that John Carradine playing him?
John Carradine does, I think, a pretty good turn as Dracula, and it's kind of because those films could and should have been better. I mean, I like them; they're fun, but and as a kid, I think the first time I saw Larry Talbot as a character, it was in House of Frankenstein, and I got in late in the movie, and he's changed into the werewolf. He's running up a hill and like it, and I fell in love. I mean, I was obsessed with the werewolf, with the Wolfman when I was a kid. One of the reasons was that film, and then Famous Monsters of Filmland put out an all werewolf issue. And that was like my Bible. I literally read that thing to shreds when I was about 10 years old. But they diminish as they go. Kurt Siodmak worked on the first few of them, and then they kind of went away. Chaney did have a couple of turns playing werewolves. He did the La Casa del Terror, and then there was an episode of Route 66, which was an early 60s TV show that was kind of like one of the network's attempts to do On the Road by Jack Kerouac. And there's some episode where they have Karloff might be in it too. I can't remember.
Karloff is the last time he did Frankenstein's monster, and Peter Lorre's in it as well.
I just remember that from seeing pictures of it in Famous Monsters. I've never seen it. I might try to dig that up. I'm glad you.
I think it might be on YouTube.
Probably, as everything else seems to be these days. But Chaney, I said, had a great love of the character, and everything that came after it really is touched by that first film. Most of the, Paul Naschy is going to get covered, and visually, the underbite that most of the werewolves has comes from the makeup for Werewolf of London and the Wolfman, and but there was a big change later. The werewolf didn't really change visually until, I would say, the American Werewolf of London, where they actually go back into the shape shifting.
The Howling. The Howling came before American Werewolf in London.
Yeah. Now I think a big influence on the change of the look of the werewolf also was Bernie Wright's Cycle of the Werewolf illustrations for Stephen King. And that, when I noticed the more wolfy looking approach, was Wright.
I'm pretty sure Cycle came after American and Howling.
You think so? It's 84.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, because I think the Cycle came out in 84, I think. So it might. So Bernie may have actually been influenced by that.
Oh, could
maybe.
Although he did a werewolf in Swamp
Thing.
That was not quite as wolfy looking. So you're probably right about that.
Definitely, Rob Bottin brought it into the modern era. I personally prefer the Rob Bottin post-Bottin look to all werewolves. That's just me. To me, there's a difference between a wolfman and a werewolf. Like, they're all werewolves, but Wolfman looks more like a man.
Right.
And actually, there's some people who create taxonomies about this stuff that name those forms with like Latin names. And
now, interestingly enough, when he's bitten by Bela in werewolf form, his werewolf is more wolfy. If I remember it. It is literally like a wolf, not a wolf.
Like in American Werewolf in London, he turns all the way into a wolf.
Which maybe that's where Larry Talbot would have evolved into had he stayed a werewolf long enough. Maybe he would have gained that ability. I don't know.
People would quit killing him.
Yeah, they kept killing him every time.
But to sum up Larry Talbot, really. What he brought to the werewolf mythology was werewolf has tortured soul that can't control himself. Pretty nice guy typically, but when the moon comes out, he's gonna be ripping somebody's throat out. And tortured soul, killing what you love, destroying things, and that whole kind of echoes of alcoholism and bipolar disorder and things like that. Mental illness. So
there was another trope that is a flip of what you just said that it also introduced, which is that the only one who could love him or kill him or
Yeah.
cure him is someone who loves him.
Right. Yeah.
And that's how the gypsy got him in the third movie. And that plot point, among many tropes, was really heavily used by Paul Nash later on.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think if there was a leading man in the Universal horror universe, it was Larry Talbot, because he even occasionally got the girl. Like when I think he gets cured, I believe, in House of Dracula, and does get the girl ultimately. And then of course he's brought back inexplicably for the comedy of Abbott and Costello.
Right.
But,
maybe he could change at will by that time.
Well, and we do see Larry Talbot again in but not Lon Chaney Jr.
Yeah.
Because there was the remake with
Never seen it.
With Javier Bardem.
Yeah.
But beyond that, also
Benicio del Toro.
Benicio, you're right. Benicio.
Do you recommend the film?
I recommend it at least once. I like it, but a lot of people don't. But I liked it. I thought it was an interesting take on it, because like you're talking about how it's like reflective of like abusive type personality. In that one, they literally like set it like where there's a sanitarium where they're doing like electrical shock therapy and stuff like that. So there's a whole nother twist to it that's going on. But I'm also going to mention Penny Dreadful. Penny Dreadful also incorporated Larry Talbot in as a character, and they integrated it with some of that Native American skinwalker type mythology as well with the werewolf. So there's a little bit more that's played with Larry Talbot, which is kind of fun to see.
Well, I was looking at the Wikipedia entry for him, and it's quite exhaustive. After the Chaney years, it's like he's referenced, if not appearing in things, referenced in all these.
He's in a lot of stories, a lot of literature.
Yeah.
So the name Larry Talbot is synonymous with werewolf. For those that know, you can't get too far from Larry Talbot when you're dealing with werewolves.
Which is
and a lot of those tropes keep coming up too. Like you'll see those even in more recent films as well that have come out in the last like couple of decades.
But I was going to say, to me, it's interesting because the Larry Talbot as a name is just so ordinary.
Yeah.
He's everything.
Larry.
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 Hello, Larry.
American guy.
I mean,
interestingly,
they do call him Lawrence. They do call him
It
Lawrence.
sounds like British nobility or something.
Yeah,
Talbot. He's a very American character, and he's in Wales, and he kind of sticks out as like a sore thumb.
Right.
Yeah.
To put Chaney in like Son of Dracula, he looks like a bouncer in a New Orleans bar or something. He just doesn't really come off as Dracula at all. And the Wolfman was his baby in that sense. That he was most believable and best as Larry Talbot.
Sure was. Yeah.
So, Bill, what you got for us?
So it's interesting. There's going to be a convention coming up pretty soon called Retcon, and I'm doing a panel.
That's an amazing pun name. Oh my god!
Yeah,
Retcon.
I'm doing a panel about monsters where I present the thesis that there are basically 6 kinds of monsters, and all monsters can be fit into these 6 categories. That's going to be the whole premise of the panel, and my co-panelists will tell me how wrong I am and just throw out examples, and I will attempt to shoot them down every single time. And one of the categories, one of the categories is werewolf. Now I'm taking a very broad view of what a werewolf is. I would include, and I think this was very influential to our idea of what werewolves are, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I see the werewolf as basically the monster that appears to be human. So any kind of transforming monsters, up to and including serial killers. Dr. Lecter seems like a very nice guy until the switch goes off, and next thing you know, you're being served with fava beans. But the classic werewolf is like one of my favorite monsters, and I've never made a werewolf movie. I've never written a werewolf script, and the reason is I would be the one that would have to build a werewolf costume, and if you don't do a good job,
it just looks cheesy and hokey and awful.
Terrible. So speaking of terrible, my first movie
oh no
is from Andy Milligan. Oh, I'm seeing awareness. Yeah, so you know what we're in for.
Are you
Oh, yes.
gonna do both of his werewolf movies or just
No,
one?
I it's been so long since I saw The Rats Are Coming, The Werewolves Are Here. Actual title. It's been
Better
so
than
long
Face of the
since I
Screaming
saw it.
Werewolf even is a title.
I'm wondering if I should be getting the spiced rum out right now to just like get through this arch.
Oh God. Andy Milligan. And
Andy
people say
Milligan.
that's his best movie. I
That's his
propose,
best movie.
I know. Andy Milligan's best movie would be something that any other person would be ashamed of. But they would go to a
I think
desert
Blood
island.
is one of his best
Oh.
movies.
Oh, Blood is by far, I think, his best movie. It's
I didn't mean to-
terrible, but it's his best movie. Blood, okay, so Blood from 1972. This is later day. Andy Milligan. I don't even know where to begin. This guy,
There's a lot.
this guy, I would postulate this man is a true artist, and I'm not being snarky. Hey, and here comes.
Speaking of,
Uh-oh.
Wait, I think he's trying to tell us something. For God's sakes, don't talk about Andy Milligan. And it's Milligan, not Mulligan, no relation. But here's the thing. I grew up my family came from Staten Island, which is where Andy performed most of his atrocities. If I had been 12 years old and found out that there was a guy on Staten Island making horror movies, I would have moved heaven and earth to get there and be on set and be there and offer to hold the microphone on one of his cheapo films. And there in the basement is where they would have found my molested dead body, identified only by dental records. Yeah. Okay. Andy had issues. He was the son of as he would describe her, overweight, psychotic, lunatic mother, a father who was browbeaten by this monster. There is some speculation Andy himself may have been molested by her. There's speculation that he may have continued the cycle. There is no happy story here.
Funny thing, I think you've actually just lined up every character in every Andy Milligan movie.
And there's the
That sounds
thing.
about right. Yeah.
There's the thing.
incest.
His movie, when you're watching his movies, you're watching, I guess, a cheaper form of therapy. And they were cheaper than therapy because William Mishkin, who produced these, gave Andy about $10,000 to make a movie, and Andy would spend $5,000. This is how he, kept a roof over his head. He was a playwright. He was a pretty good costume designer. He did everything. He held the camera. He directed. He wrote. He lit. He did everything badly. The movies are barely watchable. They look like filmed theater with just a modicum of editing. The lighting is so atrocious, it just calls attention to itself. Shadows everywhere, like it's lit by a single flashlight. But Blood has a lot going on here. It's about the son of Larry Talbot and the daughter of Dracula, who are married.
of course.
Is it a happy marriage? It's an Andy Milligan movie. There are no happy marriages. The whole thing of an Andy Milligan movie is basically a man and a woman screaming at each other. That's arguing. Sometimes, every now and then, there's a murder to keep us interested, but it's basically just miserable, unhappy people being miserable to each other and just shrieking. His women are just complete harridans. He hates women. The misogyny oozes from every frame. Clearly he had issues. People who worked with him described him as sadistic. Strangely enough, I interviewed a guy who worked with some of his last movies where Andy kind of mellowed out and looked like Wilford Brimley. And maybe things were getting better, but he died a pauper of AIDS and is buried in an unmarked grave somewhere in Hollywood. It's a miserable story. Miserable. Anyway, the daughter of Dracula, who's played by Hope. What is her name? Wait a minute. Let me just dig it up here. Hope Stansbury, who's the only good thing in the movie. She's actually pretty cool. Seems like a nice person. I've read some interviews with her. Miserable experience in this movie. She had to kill a mouse and eat its head. I know. And there's no faking. They killed a mouse.
I was going to
That's
say
what they
that
call a
actress
trooper.
had to kill a mouse.
What a
I
trooper.
know. Isn't it? It's a strange morality here, but I mean, I have killed many mice in my time. If I see a mouse in the house, I bring out the traps. Okay, I'm not going to rehabilitate him. He dies. The mice and his whole family, if I can, die. But if someone offered me $10,000 to kill a mouse, I would have to say no, because I have to live with myself for the rest of my life. So I don't know. I don't understand exactly how my morality works. I'll stomp on a roach for free, but if you said kill that thing for money, it's like, okay, now it seems wrong.
Because
And
now
definitely-
it's like you're making it weird. It's like, why are you giving me money to
yeah.
do this thing that is part of maintaining my That's weird.
Absolutely. Oh,
Like,
did I
is this a
mention-
fetish or something? Like, what's happening here?
Did I mention in this movie that there's carnivorous man-eating plants that they keep in the basement because they need to grow them to keep her from disintegrating as a vampire?
Okay.
I probably should have mentioned that.
That is some interesting vampire
sounds
lore,
legit.
yes.
Yeah. And then there's other people in makeup that is so bad. I mean, just so bad. They couldn't, I guess they couldn't find an old woman who would be in this movie. So they just took a young woman and drew lines on her face.
Oh no.
So unconvincing. Maybe if you were in the cheap seats way far away in the theater. Yeah, it all ends in a fire and the couple screaming at each other and strangling each other. And that's pretty much how every now and then there's a murder with a little bit of fake blood. But it's his best movie. Oh, it's by far his best movie. If you've got to watch an Andy Milligan movie, if it's a choice, that or Death, think about it. But then
I would say Fleshpot on 42nd Street. Well, that's just me.
That's his best made movie.
You're absolutely right. No, that and there was Vapors. When he was starting out,
very well made.
Yeah, when he was starting out, he could have been a sort of a low budget avant-garde gay filmmaker at a time when that would have actually been interesting. I mean, there's some heart in those films, and you're like, but then I guess there just wasn't any future in it. So he went into these horror movies and just made them as he did. I say he's an artist because 10 seconds into watching an Andy Milligan movie that I've never seen before, I'll say that's an Andy Milligan movie.
Yeah.
You know, like if you look at a Van Gogh, you don't need to be told it's a Van Gogh.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the world should end now that the words Van Gogh and Andy Milligan have ever
How dare you, sir?
10 seconds of each other. It actually, there's one funny bit in this movie other than just the whole thing, which is at the very end when I guess the vampire Larry and Regina, the daughter of Dracula, kill each other, I guess. And then a new couple shows up to buy this house, which should have burned down, but okay, continuity. And it turns out, I think it's either Frankenstein or Dr. Jekyll. I don't know. So it's someone else. And oh, Andy. Andy.
It's like Edward Albee with monsters.
Now, I don't recommend anyone watch Andy Milligan movies, whether they have werewolves in them or not. The werewolf shows up at the very end. It's a werewolf mask. You can see his neck as hairless as mine underneath. No effort is made to make it look good. Daughter of Dracula has the fangs that you could buy every Halloween. You just shove them in your mouth and you can't talk. You couldn't ever bite anyone with that. But by golly, this movie. If you really want to watch an Andy Milligan movie, don't buy the book. Oh shoot, what was it called? The Ghastly one.
Yeah,
The Life of Andy Milligan.
Yeah, that's
brilliant, harrowing, scarier than anything you're likely to see. It's by a guy who actually was a friend, and hard to believe, but he did have friends, and they were very devoted to him. They took care of him in the last year of his life. It's interesting. I've known some people like that. There's nothing really good about these people, but there's something about them that if you are their friend, if you almost feel like you're being their friend is earning you tremendous karma points, because here's a person who really has no reason to have friends, but is just a lost soul, someone who never had a chance. They were bound to turn out the way they did because of the way they were brought up. And, which is something it just hits me more and more now, losing my dad and everything, just how lucky I was to have the parents that I did, and how that's not common. And but for that, what would I be? I don't think I would have been Andy Milligan. I hope to God I would not be. But he produced like 38 movies, many of them lost. He kept on going to the bitter end. He just kept on going and produced this art. And he's being rediscovered. Mm-hmm. People are watching it and just seeing it's a peek into a tormented mind. So for those who are into that sort of thing, they are out there now. Blood is available in a relatively good looking print, by which it means it looks awful. on YouTube. Probably never looked better. This is probably as good as it has ever looked. If you had gotten it right out of the film lab.
Severin remastered all of them.
Oh, wow. Boy.
There's a box set. Yeah, they did a box set. Which coincided a little bit kind of with that book. I mean, a couple of years after the book.
I was thinking I was thinking about buying it, but I hate his movies. So why would I do this? If I was going to invest that money, I would have gotten the Ray Dennis Steckler set, which
I think
also had
Tim
a lot of bad
Tolbert. I think Tim, our Tim Tolbert, I think one member of our cast owns the box set of his movies. But you know, he's not here tonight, so we're not gonna cast aspersions on his taste behind his back. No, I'm kidding.
So that's my first movie. It's only uphill from there.
So that's your character, the son of Larry Talbot.
Son of Larry Talbot.